Welcome to the Tranquil Timelines channel. I know you may be finding it difficult to drift off tonight. Your mind might still be lingering on the echoes of the day, the things left undone, or the gentle hum of the world outside. That is perfectly all right. Tonight, we are here to accompany you, to step away from the noise, and to journey toward a place that is very far away and very, very quiet. Find your most comfortable position now. Take a moment to adjust your pillow, feeling its softness against your cheek. Settle deep into your mattress and pull your blanket up, feeling that weightless warmth in body. Let your shoulders drop and let us begin this slow journey through history together. The Middle Ages were not always a time of shadows. They were also a time of quiet wisdom and a deep, patient craft. Over the next few hours, we will slowly explore the life of a surgeon who lived 1,000 years ago, a man who worked in the golden light of ancient Spain. His name was Al-Zahrawi. We will walk through his sun-drenched courtyards and listen to the rhythmic scratch of his pen on parchment. These stories will unfold at a very gentle pace, designed to help your thoughts gradually soften and fade. There are no sudden noises here, no startling facts, and no tension. There are only distant memories, turning like the pages of an old, soft book. Before we begin, please share with me in the comments which country or city you are listening from, what time it is where you are, and if you find these stories helpful. And of course, feel free to like and subscribe to join our quiet community. As you listen, there is no need to remember a single. Let these voices from the past be like gentle waves washing over you, carrying you slowly towards sleep. If you fall asleep in the middle of a story, that is exactly what is meant to happen. Now, let us travel back to 10th century Córdoba, to a land of orange trees and evening bells. The Breezes of Cordoba. If you lived in the city of Córdoba 10 centuries ago, you would find that the evenings always arrived with a particular kind of softness. Imagine yourself standing on a balcony made of cool, pale stone. The sun has just dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple, like the skin of a ripe plum. The air is not cold, but it has a refreshing quality, carrying the faint, sweet scent of orange blossoms from the palace gardens nearby. In those days, the streets below were paved with smooth river stones, and if you listened closely, you would hear the rhythmic, hollow clop of a single horse passing in the distance, a sound that seems to make the surrounding silence even deeper. The city is beginning to settle. You can hear the distant melodic murmur of the Guadalquivir River as it flows under the great stone bridge, its waters moving slowly, endlessly toward the sea. Generally, this is the time when the oil lamps begin to flicker to life in the windows of the white-walled houses. The light they cast is a warm, flickering amber, dancing gently against the textured plaster of the walls. In a quiet corner of the city, tucked away from the main markets, stands a house with a heavy wooden door. If you were to walk through that door, you would find yourself in a courtyard where a small marble fountain bubbles consistently. The sound of the water is like a soft, repetitive whisper, falling back into itself over and over again. This is the home of the surgeon. Here, the air smells of old paper dried herbs, and the beeswax candles that burn steadily on a long dark oak table. Everything in this space feels slow and intentional. The shadows on the floor stretch out long and thin, reaching toward the corners of the room as the evening deepens. You feel a sense of profound stillness here, a place where time seems to have slowed down, allowing the world to simply breathe. In those days, the rhythm of life was dictated by the movement of the sun and the steady, quiet requirements of the natural world. Within the walls of this peaceful house, the surgeon Al-Zahrawi would often spend his evenings in contemplation. He would sit in a chair carved from dark wood, his hands resting lightly on the smooth surface of his desk. The room was filled with the soft, comforting weight of history. On the shelves surrounding him, hundreds of manuscript scrolls were nestled together, their edges softened by years of careful handling. Day after day, he would return to this sanctuary, finding a sense of purpose in the stillness that the evening brought. As the hours passed, he would often find himself reflecting on the many people who had come to him seeking help. He would think about the way a person's hand felt when it was resting in his, sometimes warm and trembling, sometimes cool and still. He believed that to be a healer, one had to first learn the art of listening. He would listen to the way a breath moved in and out of a chest. He would listen to the rhythm of a pulse under the skin of a wrist. And he would listen to the silence that lived between a patient's words. In his mind, every person was like a delicate landscape, and he was a traveler trying to find the path toward balance and restoration. As time goes by, the surgeon began to realize that the tools available to him were not always as gentle as the hands that used them. He would spend hours looking at the simple iron instruments of the past, feeling their weight and their rough edges. He felt that a tool should be an extension of the surgeon's own spirit, precise, calm, and purposeful. And so he began the long, slow process of reimagining the art of surgery. He would take a piece of charcoal and, with very slow movements, begin to sketch new shapes on a flat piece of wood. He would draw a needle that was curved like a silver moon, or a small blade that was as thin as a leaf. He would draw these shapes over and over again, refining the curves and the points until they felt right in his mind's eye. In those quiet moments, the only sound in the room was the soft, rhythmic scratching of the charcoal and the occasional pop of the beeswax candle as it burned down. He was never in a hurry. He knew that important things took time to grow, much like the olive trees in the hills outside the city walls. He would often say that the hands must follow what the heart has already understood. Day after day, he worked in this way, bridging the gap between what was known and what could be discovered. The surgeon also spent a great deal of time studying the ancient texts that had traveled across the desert from distant lands. He would carefully unroll a scroll, his fingers tracing the elegant, flowing lines of the script. He would read about the properties of flowers, how the crushed petals of a poppy could bring a heavy, dreamless sleep, or how the oil from a lavender plant could soothe a heated brow. He would organize these thoughts in his mind, categorizing them like the different colors of a sunset. He saw no difference between the wisdom of the ancients and the observations he made in his own courtyard. To him, they were all part of the same long, slow conversation about what it meant to be human. He would often watch the way the light moved across his floor as the moon rose higher in the sky. The silver light would touch the jars of ointments and the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Each jar had its own unique scent. Some were earthy and deep, like the smell of the forest after a rain, while others were sharp and clean, like the smell of the sea. He would take a deep breath, letting these scents ground him in the present moment. He felt a deep connection to the earth and the secrets it held. He understood that healing was not just about the body, but about creating an environment where the spirit could feel safe enough to rest. In the quiet of the night, he would sometimes walk out into his courtyard to stand by the fountain. He would watch the water shimmering under the stars, reflecting the vastness of the universe in its small moving surface. He would think about the layers of the human body, seeing them not as something to be feared, but as something to be respected and understood. He believed that the brain, in particular, was the most sacred of all territories, a place where dreams and memories lived, protected by the sturdy walls of the skull. He would wonder about the tiny vessels that carried life through those hidden spaces, moving as quietly as the water in his garden. He was a man who found beauty in the smallest details. He would notice the way a drop of water clung to the edge of a leaf before finally letting go, or the way the dust motes danced in a stray beam of moonlight. This attention to detail was what made him a pioneer. He brought the same patience to his medical work that he brought to his evening walks. He was building a foundation of knowledge, stone by stone, word by word, ensuring that the path he was clearing would be easier for those who came after him. And as he eventually returned to his desk to extinguish the candle, he did so with the quiet satisfaction of a man who knew that his work was part of a much larger, much older story. The stillness of the surgeon's house was not a hollow silence. It was a fullness, a quiet energy that gathered as the night deepened. Within this profound calm, Al-Zahrawi reached a point of remarkable clarity. He began to realize that the most important discoveries were not always found in the grand gestures of life, but in the slow, meticulous movements of the fingers and the mind. During these long hours, he turned his focus toward the most delicate of all human structures, the head and the mind it housed. He understood that, while others looked at the surface, a true healer had to look deeper into the quiet architecture that lay beneath the skin. In those days, it was a rare and significant thing to consider opening the sanctuary of the skull. It was a task that required a level of patience that few could imagine. He would sit for hours with a skull found in the ancient archives, tracing the winding lines where the bone met, lines that looked like the ancient maps of forgotten rivers. He would touch the surface with the tips of his fingers, feeling the subtle ridges and the smoothness of the bone. He believed that the skull was like a beautifully crafted box, designed by nature to protect the most precious silk. Gradually, he began to develop the techniques that would eventually allow him to treat injuries that others thought were beyond help. He would imagine the process of a surgery as if it were a slow rhythmic dance. He would think about the way a small drill, a trepan, would have to turn. It would not be a fast or aggressive movement. Instead, it would be as slow as the turning of a sundial's shadow. He would practice the motion in the air, his wrist moving with a fluid, consistent grace. He understood that the secret to success lay in the lack of haste. By moving slowly, he could feel the resistance of the material, responding to the subtle changes in pressure that only a focused mind could perceive. Day after day, he refined this internal map, preparing himself for the moments when his steady hands would be the only thing standing between a patient and the long sleep. One evening, a soldier was brought to his door, a man who had been struck during a training exercise. The man's eyes were clouded, and he moved as if he were lost in a heavy fog. Al-Zahrawi did not rush. He had the man placed on a soft bed covered in clean linen that smelled of the sun and lavender. He sat by the man's side for a long time, watching the rise and fall of his chest. He noticed the way the man's brow furrowed, as if he were trying to remember a name that was just out of reach. With a gentle touch, the surgeon examined the area where the impact had occurred. He felt a unique kind of pressure there, a sign that the bone had been pressed inward, resting too heavily against the soft world beneath. In the glow of several tall beeswax candles, the surgeon began his work. He moved with a quiet, meditative intensity. Every action was deliberate. He used a small sponge soaked in cool rose water to cleanse the skin, the scent filling the small room with a sense of peace. He then took one of the instruments he had designed himself, a thin silver elevator. The metal was cool and bright in the candlelight. With a rhythmic, steady pressure, he began the process of easing the bone back to its rightful place. He could feel the tension in the room, but he remained as calm as the deep waters of a lake. He spoke to the soldier in a low, melodic voice, even though the man could not hear him, because he believed that the spirit could always sense a calm presence. As he worked, he noticed how the light played off the instruments, creating soft reflections that danced on the ceiling. He felt a deep sense of connection to the task, as if he and the patient were the only two people left in the world. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the bone shifted. There was no sudden snap, only a gentle release of pressure. It was a significant moment, a quiet victory over the darkness that had clouded the man's mind. Al-Zahrawi watched as the man's breathing became deeper and more regular. The furrow in the man's brow began to smooth out, like the surface of a pond after a stone has settled at the bottom. Throughout the rest of the night, the surgeon remained by the bed. He did not celebrate. He simply watched and waited. He would occasionally dampen a cloth and press it to the man's forehead, the cool moisture a comfort in the quiet room. He observed the way the man's pulse began to find its natural rhythm again, steady and strong. It was in these moments of quiet observation that Al-Zahrawi felt the most fulfilled. He was not just a man with a blade, he was a guardian of the life force, a shepherd guiding a wandering soul back to the light of day. He realized that his work was not just about the physical act of surgery, but about the restoration of the self. By clearing the path within the mind, he was allowing the person to return to their family, to their dreams, and to the simple joys of a morning in Córdoba. As the first light of dawn began to touch the tops of the orange trees in the courtyard, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that the knowledge he had gained this night would be written down, preserved on parchment, and passed through the centuries like a whispered secret. He had looked into the mysteries of the brain and found not fear but a quiet, remarkable beauty. As the surgery reaches its quiet conclusion, the intense focus in the room begins to soften, dissolving into a deep, restful peace. Al-Zahrawi sets his silver instruments down onto a soft cloth, the metal making a faint, musical clink as it meets the wood. He watches the soldier, whose sleep has now turned from a heavy fog into a light, natural slumber. The crisis has passed, leaving behind only the rhythmic sound of breathing and the the steady drip of the fountain in the courtyard outside. The surgeon stands up slowly, feeling the weight of his own limbs and the comforting tiredness that comes after a long journey. He walks to the window and looks out over the city of Córdoba. The moon is now high and pale, casting a silver veil over the rooftops and the silent gardens. Everything is still. The orange trees stand like dark, fragrant sentinels in the night, their leaves barely stirring in the cooling air. You can imagine the feeling of that breeze on your own skin, a gentle, cooling touch that carries away the remnants of the day. There's no need to think about what happens next. The story simply rests here, in this moment of quiet success and profound safety. The surgeon returns to his chair and watches the last of his candles flicker. The flame dances smaller and smaller, a tiny point of gold in the vast, velvet darkness. Gradually, the golden light fades, leaving only the soft, blue glow of the moonlight on the floor. The world of 10th century Spain begins to recede now, like a boat drifting slowly away from the shore. The sounds of the fountain, the scent of the herbs, and the memory of the surgeon's steady hands all begin to blur into a soft, warm haze. You are back in your own space, wrapped in your own blankets, feeling heavy and relaxed. The history we have explored tonight is now just a distant murmur, a gentle pulse in the background of your mind. As the silence grows deeper, you find yourself letting go of the last few threads of the story, allowing yourself to sink further into the softness of your pillow, drifting slowly into a deep and dreamless sleep. Lancets on parchment. Imagine yourself back in that quiet room, but now the sun has risen, casting a soft, buttery light through the arched windows. It is a new morning in Córdoba, and the air is filled with the fresh, crisp scent of dew-dampened earth and the faint, toasted aroma of the city's bakeries beginning their day. Generally, this is the hour when the surgeon Al-Zahrawi finds his greatest focus. He sits at his heavy desk, which is no longer covered in the tools of surgery, but with the delicate instruments of a scholar. If you were to look over his shoulder, you would see a vast sheet of fine cream-colored parchment spread out before him. The texture of the paper is slightly pebbled, catching the morning light in a way that makes it look almost like velvet. There is a profound stillness here, broken only by the rhythmic, soft scratching of a reed pen as it moves across the surface. This is the space where his experience is transformed into a legacy. The room smells of iron gall ink, a deep, earthy scent, and the faint, sweet smell of the beeswax used to smooth the writing surface. The walls of the study are lined with jars of pigments, deep blues, made from lapis, lazuli, rich ochres, and the blackest inks. Everything is organized with a gentle precision. Outside, the shadows of the swallows flicker across the courtyard tiles, but inside, time seems to hold its breath. You can feel the coolness of the stone floor and the warmth of the sun on your back as you watch him work. He is not just writing, he is drawing the very future of medicine, one thin line at a time. The atmosphere is one of patient creation, where every dip of the pen into the inkwell is a slow, deliberate heartbeat. It is a place of deep safety and quiet purpose, where the chaos of the world is kept at bay by the the steady hand of a man who knows exactly what he must do. In those days, the creation of a book was not a task to be rushed. It was a devotion that spanned seasons and years. Al-Zahrawi understood that for his knowledge to live beyond his own lifetime, it had to be captured with the same precision he used in the operating theater. He would begin each session by preparing his materials with a rhythmic, meditative consistency. He would select a fresh reed pen, feeling its weight in his hand, and use a small, sharp knife to shave the tip into a perfect point. He would do this slowly, watching the thin curls of wood fall onto the desk like tiny shavings of gold. Day after day, he sat before his parchment, focusing his mind on the instruments he had used the night before. He wanted to create an encyclopedia of surgery, a guide called the Surif, which would eventually span 30 volumes. But his most unique contribution was the section dedicated entirely to the tools of the craft. Before his time, many surgeons relied on memory or crude local blacksmiths to forge their blades. Al-Zahrawi knew that the shape of a needle or the curve of a saw could be the difference between a wound that healed and one that did not, and so he decided to draw them, all 200 of them, with such clarity that any craftsman in any land could recreate them perfectly. As the morning shadows moved slowly across his desk, he would begin to sketch. He would draw a pair of forceps designed for extracting a tiny bone fragment, showing the delicate serrations on the inside of the grip. He would draw them from the side, then from the top, ensuring every angle was understood. He would use a very fine brush to add a wash of light gray ink to the drawing, giving the metal a sense of weight and shine on the flat page. In those moments, he wasn't just a surgeon, he was an artist of utility. He believed that there was a quiet beauty in a tool that performed its function perfectly. To him, a well-made lancet was as elegant as a poem, and a sturdy bone saw was as reliable as a trusted friend. As time goes by, the parchment began to fill with the shapes of his imagination and experience. He would write long, flowing descriptions beside each drawing, explaining not just what the tool was, but how it should feel in the hand. He would describe the gentle resistance one should feel when using a probe, or the steady, unwavering pressure needed for a scalpel. He used these words to coach the future surgeons who would read his work long after he was gone. He was creating a bridge across time, speaking to students. He would never meet in a voice that was always calm, patient, and encouraging. In those days, the ink he used was thick and rich. He would dip his pen into the inkwell, a small jar of dark glass, and pause for a second to let the excess drop away. This pause became a part of his natural rhythm. Dip, pause, write. Dip, pause, write, dip, pause. Write, the sound of the reed scratching against the dry skin of the parchment was like a soft, constant whisper. It was a hypnotic sound, one that filled the room and seemed to harmonize with the bubbling of the fountain in the courtyard. He would often repeat the same sentence in his mind before committing it to paper, ensuring that every word was necessary and every instruction was clear. He would often think about the craftsman who would eventually see these drawings. He imagined a blacksmith in a distant city, squinting at the page in the glow of a forge, using his hammer to shape a piece of glowing steel into the exact curve of Al-Zahrawi's drawing. This thought gave him a sense of profound connection to the world. He felt that by sharing his designs, he was helping to standardize the art of healing, making it safer for everyone, regardless of where they lived. He was weaving a safety net of knowledge, one that would catch those who fell ill or were injured in the centuries to come. Meanwhile, the life of the house continued softly around him. A servant might quietly enter to place a small bowl of dates and a cup of cool water on a side table. Al-Zahrawi would acknowledge the gesture with a small nod, but he rarely broke his focus. He was lost in the world of the page. He would spend an entire afternoon perfecting the drawing of a cautery tool, a device used to seal wounds with heat. He would draw the wooden handle with its smoothed grip and the iron tip shaped like a small, flat leaf. He would describe how the wood should be polished so as not to blister the surgeon's palm, showing a level of care that extended to the healer as much as the patient. In the quiet of the late afternoon, the light in the study would turn to a deep, warm gold. The dust motes would hang suspended in the air, illuminated like tiny stars. Al-Zahrawi would lean back and look at what he had accomplished that day. He would see rows of instruments, scissors with curved blades, specialized hooks, and delicate silver catheters, all resting silently on the parchment, waiting to be brought to life. He felt a deep sense of peace in this organization. To name a thing and to draw it was to understand it, and to understand it was to remove the fear associated with it. He was turning the terrifying world of the operating room into a place of order, light, and quiet, steady craft. The afternoon light deepened, turning the pale walls of the study into a soft, glowing amber. Within this cocoon of golden warmth, Al-Zahrawi reached the most significant portion of his work, the description of tools for the most delicate regions of the human body. He turned a fresh page of parchment, its surface keen and waiting. His movements remained slow, almost ritualistic, as he prepared to document the instruments he had used to treat the soldier's head only nights before. He knew that this was the most important bridge he would ever build, a guide into the silent, sacred spaces of the mind. As the hours drifted by, he began to sketch a specialized drill known as a non-sinking trepan. This was a tool of remarkable design, featuring a small collar that prevented the blade from plunging too deeply into the fragile layers beneath the bone. He drew the fine teeth of the circular blade with a steady, unwavering hand. He felt a deep sense of responsibility with every stroke of his pen. He was not just drawing a tool, he was providing a safeguard. He wrote about the sensation of the drill in the hand, describing how the surgeon must listen to the changing pitch of the sound as the bone was thinned, a sound that told the story of the progress better than any eye could see. The room was filled with a sense of quiet intensity. The scratch of the pen grew more rhythmic, a constant, low-level hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air. In those days, there was no greater challenge than the invisible injuries of the brain, and Al-Zahrawi addressed them with a profound, humble clarity. He began to draw the silver elevators used to lift depressed fragments of the skull. He made the curves of the metal look soft and inviting on the page, emphasizing that these tools were meant to be used with the lightness of a feather. He wrote that the surgeon's hand should be like a mother's touch, firm enough to provide support, but gentle enough to avoid causing any further distress. Gradually, the complexity of his drawings increased. He moved from simple blades to compound instruments, such as the specialized scissors he developed for cutting through thick membranes without snagging. He would draw the hinge of the scissors in great detail, showing how the screw must be tightened, just enough to allow for a smooth gliding motion. He believed that the secret to a successful recovery lay in these tiny mechanical perfections. If the tool moved smoothly, the surgeon could remain calm. If the surgeon remained calm, the atmosphere of the room would remain still, allowing the patient's own natural healing forces to take hold. Meanwhile, the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long, elegant shadows of the inkwells across the desk. Al-Zahrawi did not falter. He felt a surge of quiet energy as he began to summarize the philosophy of his craft. He wrote that the instrument is the servant of the eye, and the eye is the servant of the heart. He emphasized that no tool, no matter how perfectly forged in silver or steel, could replace the need for compassion and infinite patience. He described the sacred silence that should occupy the surgical space, where the only language spoken is the language of steady breathing and the gentle clink of metal on stone. In those moments of deep focus, he felt as though he was speaking directly to the future. He imagined a young student centuries later, perhaps in a distant land with a different language, looking at this very drawing and finding the courage to help a suffering soul. This thought gave his work a weightless quality, as if the ink were floating off the page and into the stars. He spent a long time perfecting the drawing of a small curved needle used for internal sutures. He described how the thread should be prepared, sometimes using fine silk, sometimes using the fibers of certain plants, ensuring that every step of the process was as natural and harmonious as possible. As the late afternoon turned toward dusk, the surgeon reached a point of profound completion. He had filled the pages with the wisdom of a lifetime, turning the chaos of injury into an ordered map of healing. He looked at the rows of drawings, the hooks, the probes, the mirrors, and the drills, and felt a sense of immense gratitude for the materials that allowed him to capture these thoughts. He saw the tools not as weapons against disease, but as keys that could unlock the body's own potential to repair itself. Every line on the parchment was a testament to his belief that the human body was a masterpiece worthy of the most delicate care. He finally set his pen down, the silence of the room returning like a soft blanket. He stayed in his chair for a long time, watching the ink dry on the final page. The dark liquid shimmered for a few moments before settling into the grain of the parchment, becoming a permanent part of the record. He felt a deep, resonant peace in his chest, the kind of peace that comes from knowing a great task has been handled with integrity and love. The tools of his mind were now resting on the page, ready to wait through the coming nights and years, holding their secrets until they were needed once again by a hand that was ready to learn. The light in the study has now shifted to a soft charcoal gray as the evening truly begins to settle. Al-Zahrawi watches as the last of the ink loses its wet sheen, turning into a matte, permanent part of the parchment. The heavy work of the day is done. He slowly closes the inkwell, the small glass lid making a soft, muffled sound. There is a profound sense of relief in the room, a feeling of weightlessness that comes when a long journey has finally reached a place of rest. You can imagine him leaning back in his chair, his muscles relaxing one by one. He looks at his hands, now slightly stained with the dark ink of his labor, and feels a deep connection to the history recorded. Outside, the world of Córdoba is turning toward the night. The swallows have returned to their nests, and the air has grown still and cool. The scent of the orange blossoms is once again rising from the courtyard, mingling with the cooling stone and the faint, lingering smell of the beeswax candles. There is no more need for the pen or the parchment. The stories and the diagrams are safely held within the pages, resting in the quiet dark of the library. You can feel the same stillness entering your own space. The room around you is soft and dim, and your thoughts are becoming as light as the dust motes that have settled on the surgeon's desk. The rhythm of the day has faded into the slow, steady rhythm of the night. As you lie there, the image of the surgeon's quiet study begins to dissolve. The arches, the inkwells, and the stacks of parchment drift away into a gentle gray mist. All that remains is the feeling of being safe, protected, and completely at ease. The sounds of the ancient city are gone, replaced by the quiet hum of your own breathing. Like the ink settling into the page, you are settling into the warmth of your bed. The world is quiet. The journey is over for now. You are ready to let go, drifting down, deeper and deeper into a soft, velvet sleep. Mysteries of the skull in light and shadow. If you were to step into the courtyard of Al-Zahrawi during the quiet hours of a midsummer night, you would find the world bathed in a different kind of light. The moon in Córdoba often appears large and silver, casting sharp, clean shadows across the whitewashed walls of the medical garden. Generally, this is the time when the surgeon seeks a deeper understanding of the hidden structures of the human body. The air is thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, a fragrance that is both sweet and heavy, helping to anchor the senses in the present moment. In the center of the workspace, a single large lamp filled with olive oil burns with a steady golden flame. It does not flicker, for the air inside the stone room is perfectly still. This light is precious. It is focused downward onto a collection of anatomical models and ancient drawings that depict the complex curves of the human head. You can imagine the texture of the cool marble floor beneath your feet and the way the stone walls hold the coolness of the earth, providing a sanctuary from the heat of the Andalusian day. There is a profound sense of reverence in this space. Al-Zahrawi moves through the room with a slow, rhythmic grace, his soft leather slippers making almost no sound on the floor. Everything here is clean and orderly. There are basins of clear water, bundles of dried sage used for purification, and smooth, polished stones used to weight down the edges of delicate scroll. The atmosphere is not one of clinical coldness, but of a warm, quiet mystery. It is a place where the light and the shadow work together to reveal the secrets of the skull, the ivory fortress that protects the world of our thoughts. You feel a sense of safety here, as if you are standing in a place where time has paused to allow for a moment of pure, uninterrupted observation. In those days, the study of the human frame was approached with the same patience one might use to study the movement of the stars. Al-Zahrawi believed that to understand the mind, one first had to appreciate the vessel that held it. Day after day, he would spend his quietest hours observing the intricate patterns of the human skull, which he regarded as a masterpiece of natural architecture. He would sit by the light of his oil lamp, holding a specimen with great care, his fingers tracing the delicate sutures where the plates of bone joined together. He saw these lines not as mere seams, but as the boundaries of a sacred landscape, as complex and meaningful as the coastlines on a navigator's map. As the night progressed, he would often reflect on the dual nature of his work, the balance between the strength of the bone and the softness of the life it protected. He would observe how the forehead curved upward in a sturdy arch, designed to deflect the hardships of the outside world, while the base of the skull featured small, smooth openings for the nerves to pass through like silken threads. He moved his hands over these surfaces with a rhythmic, steady motion, a habit that helped him internalize the map of the human head. He knew that when he was called to help a patient, he would need to navigate this terrain in the dark, guided by the memory of these quiet hours of study. As time goes by, the surgeon began to focus his thoughts on the unique challenges of the brain. He understood that unlike a broken arm or a surface wound, an injury within the skull was a mystery hidden behind a wall of ivory. He began to develop a philosophy of minimal intervention, a revolutionary idea in an age of often aggressive treatments. He believed that the healer's role was to gently remove the obstacles to recovery, allowing the body's own internal light to restore the balance. He would spend hours thinking about how to lift a fragment of bone without disturbing the quiet world beneath it, his mind playing through the motions with the slow, deliberate pace of a dream. In those days, the silence of his study was a tool in itself. It allowed him to hear the thoughts that the busy day drowned out. He would often repeat certain phrases to himself, a rhythmic mantra of care: be as light as the wind, be as steady as the mountain. This repetition helped him maintain a state of calm that he could carry into the most difficult moments of his craft. He would watch the way the shadows of his instruments grew and shrunk on the wall as the lamp oil burnt lower, finding a strange comfort in the predictable movement of the light. Everything in his environment was designed to foster a sense of unwavering focus and peace. Meanwhile, he continued to add to his observations on parchment. He wrote about the thickness of the bone in different regions of the head, noting how it was like the walls of a city, stronger in some places, more delicate in others. He used a very soft charcoal to shade his drawings, creating a sense of three-dimensional depth that allowed the reader to feel the roundness of the skull. He was careful to use simple, clear language, avoiding any words that might cause excitement or fear. He spoke of the brain as a garden of the soul, and the skull as the garden wall that kept the wind from chilling the delicate flowers within. In the quiet of the late night, he would sometimes close his eyes and practice feeling the structures in his mind. He would visualize the path of the blood vessels, seeing them as tiny, pulsing rivers of light moving through the darkness. He believed that a surgeon must be able to see through the skin, to have a mental image so clear that the physical act of surgery was merely a confirmation of what was already known. This mental preparation was a slow, meditative process that he performed night after night, building a foundation of confidence that was rooted in deep, respectful familiarity. He would often think about the nature of pain and how it could be eased through the use of natural elements. He studied the properties of the mandrake root and the juice of the lettuce seed, which could be used to create a heavy, peaceful sleep for those undergoing treatment. He would mix these preparations himself, the rhythmic grinding of the pestle and the mortar creating a soft, sandy sound that filled the room. He took great care in the scent of these medicines, believing that a pleasant aroma could help calm a worried heart even before the medicine began to work. He was a man who understood that healing began with the senses. As the moon reached its highest point, Al-Zahrawi would stand and stretch his limbs, feeling a deep sense of connection to the world around him. He felt that his study of the skull was not just a medical pursuit, but a way of honoring the complexity of life itself. He saw the same patterns in the veins of a leaf and the sutures of a skull, a realization that brought him a profound sense of unity and peace. He was a guardian of the most delicate boundaries, a man who lived in the space between the light of knowledge and the shadow of the unknown, always moving with the same slow, purposeful grace that defined his life and his legacy. The stillness within the stone room deepened as the candle flame grew steady and tall, casting a soft, golden glow over the surgeon's latest work. It was in these hours of absolute quiet that Al-Zahrawi approached the most significant realization of his career, the understanding that the brain was not merely a physical organ, but a delicate landscape that required a unique kind of gentleness. He turned his attention to a specific case, a young man who had fallen from a great height and could no longer find his words. In the soft light of the study, the surgeon began to map out a path to recovery, moving his hands over a model of the skull as if he were navigating the gentle curves of a familiar river. In those days, the thought of reaching the brain was often met with hesitation, but Al-Zahrawi felt a profound, quiet confidence. He understood that the pressure of a trapped fluid or a displaced piece of bone was like a heavy stone resting on a seedling. To help the seedling grow, one simply had to move the stone slowly and without disturbance. He began to prepare for the procedure with a meditative focus that filled the room. He selected his finest trepan, a tool that looked more like a piece of jewelry than a surgical instrument, its silver surface polished until it gleamed like a star. He held it in his palm, feeling its balance and its cool weight, allowing his own heartbeat to slow down to match the rhythm of the quiet room. As the night progressed, he visualized the entire process in his mind's eye. He saw himself making a small, precise opening in the bone, a window of light into the darkness. He imagined the sound of the tool, a rhythmic, soft grinding that was as steady as the ticking of a clock. He knew that the secret was to move so slowly that the body realized it was being touched. He practiced the motion of his wrist, turning it just a fraction of a millimeter at a time, his breathing becoming a low, consistent hum that harmonized with the silence. This was the moment where his years of observation and his nights of study converged into a single focused intention. The room seemed to grow warmer as he focused, a comfortable, enveloping heat that made every movement feel fluid and effortless. He thought about the delicate membranes that lay just beneath the bone, layers as thin and iridescent as a dragonfly's wing. He wrote in his journal that a surgeon must have the eyes of a hawk and the heart of a dove, a phrase he repeated to himself as he refined his plan. He was not looking for a dramatic victory. He was seeking a return to the natural state of peace. He He believed that by restoring the space within the skull, he was giving the man back his voice, his memories, and his connection to the world. Gradually, the details of the procedure became as clear as the stars in the Andalusian sky. He would use a sponge soaked in a mixture of vinegar and rosewater to keep the area cool and clean, the scent providing a calming influence for everyone in the room. He would use his silver elevators to lift the bone with a pressure that was almost non-existent, a movement as light as a shadow crossing a wall. He understood that in the world of the brain, the smallest actions had the greatest consequences. He felt a deep sense of respect for the fragility of life, a feeling that translated into a level of care that was almost spiritual in its intensity. Meanwhile, the oil in the lamp continued to burn with a steady, unwavering light. Al-Zahrawi felt as though he were standing on the edge of a great discovery, one that would change the way future generations viewed the head and the mind. He was stripping away the fear and the superstition that often surrounded such injuries, replacing them with a clear, calm, and repeatable method. He drew a final diagram on his parchment, showing the exact placement of the tools, his pen moving with a graceful, flowing rhythm that seemed to echo the curves of the brain itself. He was creating a guide for the curious minds of the future, a map that led through the darkness and into the light of healing. In the quiet of the late hour, he felt a profound connection to the patient he was about to help. He saw the man not as a collection of symptoms, but as a person with a story that deserved to continue. This empathy was the true source of his skill. It allowed him to stay present in the moment, to feel the subtle changes in the bone, and to respond with a precision that was guided by the heart. He knew that when the sun rose, he would be ready. He would move with the same slow, purposeful grace that had guided him through all the long nights of his life. A healer who understood that the greatest mysteries were best approached with a quiet mind and a gentle hand. As the climax of his preparation reached its end, a sense of immense peace settled over the room. The plans were laid, the tools were ready, and the path was clear. Al-Zahrawi felt a deep, resonant satisfaction, the kind of quiet joy that comes from being exactly where you are meant to be. He looked at the model of the skull one last time, seeing it now not as a barrier, but as a gateway. He had found the balance between the light and the shadow, and in doing so, he had found the key to a remarkable kind of healing. The mystery was no longer a source of anxiety, but a source of wonder, a quiet truth waiting to be revealed in the soft light of the coming dawn. The silver moonlight has begun to slide across the floor, reaching the edge of the surgeon's desk and signaling the end of his nightly vigil. Al-Zahrawi watches as the light touches his diagrams, turning the dark ink into lines of pale silk. The deep intensity of his study now softens, shifting into a state of quiet reflection. He slowly stands, his movements fluid and unhurried. As he begins to tidy his workspace for the morning, there is a profound sense of order here. The instruments are wiped clean, the scrolls are rolled with care, and the heavy stone basins are emptied of their cool water. You can imagine the feeling of the night air as it flows through the open archway, carrying the distant, rhythmic chirping of crickets from the gardens beyond. The heat of the day has completely vanished, replaced by a refreshing, velvety coolness. that seems to settle in your own lungs with every breath you take. The surgeon walks to the edge of his balcony and looks out over the sleeping city. Córdoba is a sea of quiet shadows and pale stone, resting under the watchful gaze of the stars. There is no more work to be done tonight. The mysteries of the skull have been honored, mapped, and understood. The heavy weight of the day's questions has been set aside, leaving only a clear, open space in the mind. You can feel this same clarity beginning to settle over you. Your thoughts are moving more slowly now, like the last drops of water falling from the courtyard fountain into the dark pool below. As you lie in the stillness of your own room, the image of the surgeon's stone sanctuary begins to fade. The scent of jasmine and the glow of the oil lamp drift away, replaced by the familiar comfort of your own bed. The world is safe. The secrets of the past are resting, and your mind is free to wander into the soft, quiet world of dreams. You are sinking deeper into the warmth, letting go of the light and the shadow, drifting into a long and peaceful rest. The Silver Sutures. If you were to walk through the surgeon's halls during the mid-morning, you would find a room that feels almost like a weaver's workshop. The air here is filled with a different kind of industry, not the loud clanging of metal, but the soft, rhythmic rustle of silk and the gentle tension of fine threads. Generally, this is where Al-Zahrawi develops his most subtle innovations. The art of closing a wound so perfectly that the body forgets it was ever opened. The light in this room is bright and clear, filtered through high linens that soften the Spanish sun into a milky pearlescent glow. On the long wooden tables, you would see small carved boxes containing various types of fibers. There are spools of vibrant silk, fine silver wires that catch the light like spider webs, and, most uniquely, strands of catgut, a material Al-Zahrawi discovered could be naturally absorbed by the body. The room smells faintly of clean wool and the sharp, medicinal scent of alcohol used to preserve the needles. You can imagine the feeling of these threads between your fingers. Some are as smooth as water, while others have the slight, honest grip of natural fiber. The atmosphere is one of profound focus and incredible delicacy. There is a small, steady sound of a needle piercing a test piece of soft leather. Shesh, tuck, as the surgeon practices his stitches. Each movement is a lesson in patience. The room feels grounded and safe, a place where the jagged edges of the world are being mended back together with care and grace. You feel a sense of calm, watching the silver needles move through the air, tracing slow, elegant arcs in the soft morning light. It is a place of repair and restoration, where the goal is always to return things to their original, unbroken state. In those days, the final act of a surgery, the closing of the skin, was often overlooked by others, but for Al-Zahrawi, it was the most vital moment of the healing process. He believed that the body was a sacred textile, and the surgeon was a master weaver whose duty was to restore the fabric without leaving a trace of the struggle. He would spend his mornings in the quiet company of his materials, developing a philosophy of the invisible mend. He would sit by the window, the dust motes dancing in the soft light, and test the strength of different threads against the weight of a small stone. He did this with a rhythmic, steady patience, finding a meditative quality in the repetition of the task. The most remarkable of his discoveries began with a simple observation in the nature of the world around him. He noticed that certain materials, when left within the body, caused the flesh to grow angry and red, while others seemed to be accepted as if they had always belonged there. Legend says that after a monkey accidentally ate the strings of a lute made from animal intestines, Al-Zahrawi observed how the natural fibers dissolved without harm. From this humble observation, he developed the use of catgut for internal sutures. He would prepare these strands by soaking them in bowls of herb-infused oils, making them supple and strong. He would run the strands through his fingers, feeling the texture become as smooth as silk, ensuring they would glide through the skin without resistance. Day after day, he practiced the geometry of the stitch. He did not believe in simply pulling two edges together. He believed in the interrupted suture, where each stitch was its own independent anchor of strength. He would take a curved needle made of the finest silver and practice the motion of the wrist, a gentle rolling turn that allowed the needle to follow its own natural arc. He would repeat this motion hundreds of times on pieces of fine linen, his hands moving with a fluid, consistent grace. The sound of the thread trailing through the fabric was a soft, rhythmic sippin, a sound that became the soundtrack to his contemplative mornings. As the hours passed, he would turn his attention to the aesthetics of healing. He was one of the first to champion the use of two needles at once, a technique that allowed for a more even distribution of tension across a wound. He called this the tailor's stitch, and he took great pride in how neat and orderly the results were. He wrote in his journals that a surgeon should treat every wound as if it were on the face of a king, with the utmost respect for the person's appearance and dignity. He used simple, repetitive language to describe these techniques, ensuring that his students would understand that speed was the enemy of beauty. One stitch at a time, he would whisper, like one heartbeat at a time. Meanwhile, the life of the medical school moved softly around him. Students would sometimes stand in the doorway, watching in silence as their master worked. He would show them how to tie a knot that would hold firm without pinching the skin, using a series of slow, deliberate loops that looked like a quiet ritual. He taught them that the tension must be just so, neither too tight to restrict the life-giving blood, nor too loose to allow the wound to breathe. He believed that this balance was a reflection of the balance required in all things in life. By teaching them to sew with grace, he was teaching them to think with precision. In those days, the preparation of the needles was just as important as the thread. He would use a small whetstone to sharpen the points until they could pierce a leaf falling through the air. He would then polish the silver until it glowed, believing that a smooth surface was less likely to carry the hidden heat of infection. He would organize his needles by size and curve in small wooden trays lined with blue velvet. This organization brought a sense of profound order to the room, a visual representation of a mind that had mastered the chaos of injury. He often thought about the way the body healed itself under the cover of his stitches. He saw his work as providing a temporary bridge, a safe harbor where the skin could find its way back to its neighbor. He would write about the miracle of the mend, describing how the flesh would eventually weave its own new threads, gradually replacing his silver and silk with the sturdy fabric of life. This thought gave him a sense of deep humility. He was not the creator of the healing. He was merely the one who held the door open for it to happen. As the midday sun reached its peak, casting a bright, steady light across his workspace, Al-Zahrawi would lean back and look at the rows of perfectly aligned stitches on his practice cloth. They looked like a row of tiny silver birds resting on a wire. There was a great peace in this sight. The knowledge that through these slow, repetitive actions, he had created a way to close the door on pain and open the path toward a scarless future. He felt a deep, resonant satisfaction in the quiet craft of the suture, a craft that required nothing more than a steady hand, a sharp needle, and an infinite well of patience. The soft morning light has now matured into a steady, brilliant glow, illuminating the surgeon's hands as he prepares for the most delicate application of his craft. Within this peak of clarity, Al-Zahrawi turns his focus to the sutures required for the most sensitive areas, the eyelids, the lips, and the intricate skin of the scalp. He understands that in these places, the stitching must be more than just functional. It must be almost ethereal, a ghostly presence that guides the skin back to wholeness without leaving a footprint. He selects a needle so fine it is nearly invisible against the palm of his hand, a sliver of silver that feels as light as a dried blade of grass. In those days, the climax of a surgeon's skill was tested not by the speed of the cut, but by the meticulousness of the closure. He begins to demonstrate a technique he calls the hidden seam, a method where the needle travels just beneath the surface of the skin, never fully emerging until the very end. He moves with a rhythmic, trance-like concentration. The room is so quiet that you might hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of the surgeon, a steady in and out that regulates the pulse of his fingers. He believes that the needle should move like a silver fish through a calm pond, disturbing the surface as little as possible. Each tiny, incremental pull of the silk thread is a testament to a lifetime of discipline. As he works, the complexity of the pattern grows, yet the appearance remains remarkably simple. He is creating a series of loops that distribute the tension so perfectly that the wound edges meet with the precision of 2 pages in a well-bound book. There is no puckering, no pulling, and no stress on the tissue. He describes this state as the harmony of the edges. He writes in his notes that when the tension is perfectly balanced, the body does not feel the need to fight the thread. Instead, it embraces it. He uses a specialized knot, a square knot tied with a triple loop, which he tightens with a slow, gradual pressure until it sits flat and firm against the skin, like a small, smooth pebble in a stream. The atmosphere in the room reaches a state of profound stillness and elevated peace where the only thing that exists is the relationship between the needle, the thread, and the wound. Al-Zahrawi feels a deep sense of connection to the patient's future. He knows that by performing this act with such extreme care, he is preventing the thick, roped scars that often haunt those who have been injured. He is giving the patient back their reflection in the mirror, unchanged and unburdened by the memory of the trauma. This realization brings a quiet, glowing energy to his work, a sense of purpose that makes the hours feel like minutes. Meanwhile, he introduces the use of silver wire for certain types of deep sutures. He explains that silver has a cool nature that keeps the wound from becoming restless or heated. He handles the wire with incredible gentleness, curving it into soft, permanent shapes that will hold the deeper structures of the body in place while they mend. The sight of the silver wire against the pale linen is strikingly beautiful, a metallic embroidery that serves the highest purpose of life. He demonstrates how to twist the ends of the wire so they remain smooth and tucked away, ensuring that nothing will irritate the surrounding area. He believes that every detail, no matter how small, is a brick in the wall of the patient's recovery. Gradually, he moves toward the final tie of the procedure. This is the moment where all the individual movements coalesce into a finished whole. He takes a deep, cleansing breath, his eyes never leaving the work. He performs the final knot with a slow, graceful flourish, a movement that signifies the end of the intervention and the beginning of the healing. He clips the excess thread with a pair of small, curved scissors, the snip sounding like a final authoritative period at the end of a long sentence. The wound is closed. It is no longer a site of injury, but a site of restoration, a clean line held together by the quiet strength of his silver and silk. In the silence that follows, Al-Zahrawi remains still, his hands resting lightly on the table. He observes the work with a humble, objective eye. He sees the way the skin sits naturally, the way the light reflects off the tiny silver loops, and he feels a deep, resonant satisfaction. He has applied the same patience to this closing act that he applied to the opening of the skull. He has mastered the art of mending, proving that the greatest power of the surgeon is not the power to change, but the power to restore. He feels a sense of immense gratitude for the steady hands and the clear mind that allowed him to complete this ritual of repair, knowing that the invisible mend will now do its work in the quiet darkness of the days to come. The brilliant morning light has begun to soften as it moves across the room, leaving the surgeon's table in a gentle, warm shadow. Al-Zahrawi slowly gathers the remaining spools of silk and the fine silver wires, returning them to their velvet-lined boxes. The rhythmic thush-tuck of the needle has ceased, leaving behind a silence that feels thick and comforting, like a heavy wool blanket. The work of mending is complete, and the room seems to exhale a long, quiet breath of relief. You can imagine the surgeon standing by the basin, washing the remnants of the day from his hands with cool water. The water ripples softly, reflecting the pale blue of the sky through the high windows. He looks down at his practice cloths, where the rows of silver stitches glint one last time in the fading light. They are quiet now, their duty done, waiting to be studied by the next generation of healers. Everything in the workshop is returning to a state of rest. The spools are still, the needles are tucked away, and the scent of clean linen remains as a lingering memory of the morning's craft. There is no more tension to hold. The edges have been met, the knots have been tied, and the healing has begun. You can feel this same sense of closure in your own body. The muscles in your hands and shoulders are loosening, becoming as soft as the silk threads the surgeon so carefully handled. The images of the silver needles and the golden light are beginning to drift and blur, melting into a single peaceful hum. As you lie there, the surgeon's workshop slowly dissolves into the quiet dark of the night. The city of Córdoba is far away now, a distant dream of stone and orange trees. You are here, safe in the warmth of your bed, feeling the rhythmic rise and fall of your own breathing. Like a perfectly placed suture, your mind is closing the door on the waking world, allowing you to drift, weightless and calm, into a deep, restorative sleep. Contemplation in the medical garden. If you were to follow the surgeon as the heat of the day begins to break, you would find yourself stepping into a world of vibrant green and deep, earthy shadows. This is the medical garden, a walled sanctuary hidden behind the stone clinic. Generally, this is the place where Al-Zahrawi comes to reconnect with the sources of his medicine. The air here is noticeably cooler, held in place by the thick leaves of lemon and pomegranate trees. It is a dense, fragrant atmosphere, filled with the overlapping scents of crushed mint, bitter wormwood, and the sweet, resinous perfume of rosemary bushes. The ground beneath your feet consists of fine, pale sand and smooth river stones that have been laid out in geometric paths. As you walk, you can hear the crunch of the sand and the distant, melodic gurgle of a small irrigation channel. In this garden, water moves through narrow stone troughs, a constant, low-level murmur that sounds like a quiet conversation between the earth and the sky. The light is dappled and soft, filtered through a canopy of vines that create moving patterns of gold and emerald on the ground. Everything in this garden has a purpose. There are low stone walls that protect the delicate poppies and trellises that support the heavy weight of the climbing jasmine. The atmosphere is one of profound, natural order. It is a place where the logic of the surgeon meets the rhythm of the seasons. You feel a sense of deep, grounding safety here, as if the plants themselves are exhaling a quiet reassurance. The garden does not hurry. It grows, it breathes, and it heals at its own pace. Watching Al-Zahrawi move among his herbs, his hand occasionally brushing against a tall stalk of lavender, you feel the tension of the day beginning to dissolve into the rich, damp scent of the living earth. In those days, the boundary between the surgeon's blade and the gardener's spade was very thin. Al-Zahrawi believed that the forest and the field were the ultimate pharmacies, providing the slow-acting miracles that complemented his precise work with the needle and the drill. He would spend his late afternoons walking the narrow paths of his garden, his movements slow and rhythmic, his eyes observing the health of each plant with the same care he gave to his patients. He would stop before a patch of blooming poppies, their red petals as thin and delicate as silk. He knew that within their seed pods lay a heavy dream-filled sap that could grant a person a temporary escape from the sharpest pains. He would touch a leaf with the pad of his thumb, feeling its coolness, and find a meditative peace in the plant's silent existence. Day after day, he followed the same quiet routine of cultivation. He would use a small wooden rake to smooth the sand of the paths, the repetitive scraping sound acting as a focus for his thoughts. He believed that a healer's mind must be as orderly as a well-tended garden, free of the weeds of anxiety or the thorns of pride. As he worked the soil, he would reflect on the relationship between the earth and the human body. He saw how the roots of the willow tree, which thrived in the damp soil near the irrigation channels, could be boiled into a bitter tea to cool a rising fever. He saw how the bark of certain trees could be ground into a powder to dry a weeping wound. He felt a deep, resonant connection to these natural cycles, understanding that he was merely a facilitator of a much larger, more ancient process of renewal. As time goes by, the garden became a place of profound study. Al-Zahrawi would sit on a low stone bench under the shade of a fig tree, a small wooden tablet in his lap. He would observe the insects, the bees moving with a purposeful hum from flower to flower, and the dragonflies hovering like iridescent needles over the water. He noted how the plants responded to the movement of the sun, some opening their hearts to the light, while others waited for the cool embrace of the moon. He wrote that a patient too has their own seasons of healing, and that a surgeon must be patient enough to wait for the right moment to act. He used simple, repetitive descriptions in his notes, focusing on the texture of the soil and the clarity of the water, creating a record that was as much a prayer as it was a medical text. In those days, the irrigation of the garden was a marvel of quiet engineering. The water was brought from the river through a series of underground channels, eventually emerging into the sunlight to flow through the stone troughs. Al-Zahrawi would often stand by the main sluice gate, watching the water ripple over the mossy stones. The sound was a constant, low-level murmur, a liquid song that seemed to wash away the heavy memories of the clinic. He would dip his hands into the flow, feeling the invigorating chill of the mountain-born water. He believed that water was the first and most important medicine, a symbol of the fluid life force that moved through the veins and the mind. He would watch a stray leaf float down the channel, moving effortlessly with the current, and remind himself to move through his own life with the same lack of resistance. Meanwhile, he continued his experiments with the preparation of botanical oils. He would gather bundles of lavender and rosemary, tying them with twine and hanging them to dry in the shaded arcade. The scent in this part of the garden was particularly thick and calming, a mixture of pine, citrus, and sun-baked earth. He would later press these dried herbs in a heavy stone press, watching the dark, fragrant oil drip slowly into a ceramic jar. This process was slow and deliberate, requiring hours of steady pressure. He found a deep satisfaction in the physical labor, the rhythmic turning of the press becoming a form of moving meditation. These oils were not just for the body. He used them to scent the air of his treatment rooms, believing that a calm spirit was the best foundation for a successful surgery. He often thought about the spirit of the plant and how it interacted with the spirit of the man. He would walk among the tall, flowering stalks of the mallow plant, noticing how its leaves felt soft and velvety to the touch. He knew that a poultice made from these leaves could soften a hardened swelling, bringing a sense of ease to a strained limb. He saw the plants as his silent partners, each one holding a secret key to a different door of the human experience. He would talk to the plants in a low, melodic voice, not because he expected them to answer, but because the act of speaking his intentions helped to clarify his own mind. He was a man who lived in a state of constant, quiet conversation. In the quiet of the late afternoon, the light in the garden would turn to a deep liquid gold. The shadows of the trees would stretch out across the paths, reaching toward the stone walls like long, dark fingers. Al-Zahrawi would find a place of stillness, perhaps standing by a large clay pot filled with flowering basil. He would close his eyes and simply listen to the wind in the leaves, the water in the troughs, and the distant, muffled sounds of the city beyond the walls. He felt a sense of immense gratitude for this sanctuary. It was a place where he could shed the weight of his responsibilities and simply be a part of the living earth. He understood that to be a great surgeon, one must also be a humble observer of the life that exists without human intervention. As he eventually prepared to leave the garden, he would take a single leaf of mint or a small sprig of rosemary, crushing it between his fingers to carry the scent with him back into the house. He felt grounded, refreshed, and ready for whatever the night might bring. The garden had given him its peace, and he in turn had given it his care. He moved back toward the heavy wooden door, his footsteps light on the sand, leaving the plants to their quiet growth under the emerging stars. He had learned that the secret to healing was not just found in the sharp edge of the blade, but in the slow, patient unfolding of a leaf and the steady, rhythmic flow of the water. The golden hour in the garden brings a shift in the air, a transition from the warmth of the sun to the profound, cool depth of the coming evening. Within this shifting light, Al-Zahrawi reaches the peak of his daily contemplation. He stands at the very center of the garden, where 4 stone paths meet at a circular pool of water. This is the heart of his sanctuary. He begins to synthesize everything he has learned, the precision of the surgery, the order of the parchment, and the slow growth of the herbs, into a single unified philosophy of life. He understands that the ultimate goal of the surgeon is to become as invisible and as necessary as the air that feeds the plants. In those days, the climax of a scholar's day was often this moment of silent synthesis. He looks at the water in the central pool, which is perfectly still, reflecting the darkening blue of the sky and the first faint glimmer of a distant star. He realizes that the human mind, much like this pool, can only reflect the truth when it is calm. If the surface is troubled by fear or haste, the reflection is broken. He practices a slow, rhythmic breathing technique, drawing the scent of the damp earth and the cooling herbs deep into his lungs. With each exhale, he imagines the tension leaving his body, sinking into the ground to be transformed by the roots of the trees. He feels a sense of profound quiet power in this stillness. As the shadows grow longer, he begins to walk the perimeter of the garden one last time, a movement he performs with a graceful, trance-like consistency. He stops at the bed of mandragora, the plant whose roots provide the deep sleep for surgeries. He reflects on the immense responsibility of granting someone the gift of unconsciousness. He sees it not as a loss of life, but as a temporary return to the earth, a time for the body to focus all its energy on mending without the interference of the waking mind. He writes in his mental journal that the surgeon must be the shepherd of the sleep, guarding the patient's soul while their body is being repaired. This thought brings a surge of quiet, protective energy to his heart, a feeling that is both heavy and light. The atmosphere in the garden reaches a state of shimmering intensity. The sounds of the city have faded into a distant, rhythmic hum, leaving only the immediate music of the sanctuary. Al-Zahrawi hears the rustle of a small bird settling into the pomegranate tree. and the soft, repetitive plink of a single drop of water falling from a leaf into the trough. He feels as though he is standing at the center of a great revolving wheel of time. He thinks about the surgeons who came before him and those who will follow, all of them walking these same paths, seeking the same balance between the blade and the balm. He feels a deep sense of gratitude for being a link in this eternal chain of healers. Meanwhile, he turns his attention to the most delicate plant in his collection, the white lily used for soothing the most sensitive of skin irritations. The petals are luminous in the twilight, appearing almost to glow with their own internal light. He touches a petal with the tip of his finger, marveling at its coolness and its strength. He realizes that true strength often wears the mask of fragility. This is the lesson he carries back to his medical practice, that the most powerful healing often comes from the gentlest touch. He understands that by respecting the delicate nature of the human frame, he is tapping into a strength that is far greater than any force. Gradually, the last of the sun's rays disappear behind the high stone walls, leaving the garden in a state of soft blue twilight. Al-Zahrawi feels a sense of immense completion. He has gathered the wisdom of the day and distilled it into a quiet, unwavering intent. He knows that when he returns to the clinic tomorrow, he will carry the scent of this garden in his robes and the rhythm of this water in his pulse. He has found the balance between action and observation, between the intervention of the hand and the patience of the soul. He stands in the center of the garden for one final minute of absolute silence, allowing the peace of the plants to become his own. In the quiet of this climax, there is no excitement, only a profound deepening of the silence. Al-Zahrawi feels a resonant satisfaction that vibrates through his entire being. He has mended the bodies of his patients. He has recorded his knowledge for the future. And now, he has mended his own spirit in the company of the green world. He sees that the garden is not just a source of medicine, but a teacher of the highest order. It has taught him that everything has its time, that beauty is a form of healing, and that the greatest work is done in the quietest moments. He bows his head slightly to the garden, a gesture of humble thanks, before turning toward the light of his home. The deep blue of the twilight has now transitioned into a velvety, star-flecked blackness. Al-Zahrawi makes his way slowly back toward the stone archway of his house, his footsteps leaving light, rhythmic impressions in the cool sand. Behind him, the garden settles into its nightly rest. The flowers have closed their petals. The water in the troughs has slowed to a dark silver ribbon, and the scent of the herbs has deepened into a thick, comforting musk that hangs low over the soil. You can imagine the feeling of leaving that green sanctuary as the heavy wooden door swings shut with a soft, muffled thud. The sounds of the garden become a memory, a quiet hum that stays with you. The coolness of the garden air follows you into the house, a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the lingering day. The surgeon's task in the garden is finished. He has found the restoration he sought, and he carries it with him like a hidden treasure. There is no more need for thought or action. The garden is growing on its own, the water is flowing on its own, and the world is mending in the dark. You can feel this same natural progression in your own body. Your mind is like that central pool of water, still, dark, and reflecting only the quietest stars. The images of the pomegranate trees and the stone paths are fading now, drifting away into the soft, gray edges of your consciousness. As you lie there, the world of 10th century Córdoba dissolves completely. The scent of mint and the sound of the fountain are gone, replaced by the perfect, heavy stillness of your own room. You are safe. You are at peace. The rhythm of the garden has become the rhythm of your own slow, deep breathing. You are ready now to let go of the last few threads of the story, sinking down deeper and deeper into the warm, fragrant darkness of a long and restorative sleep. Legacy under the starlight. Imagine the night has reached its deepest point, that silent hour when the city of Córdoba holds its breath. The air is no longer warm with the sun or busy with the scent of the garden. It is now a vast, cool expanse of silver and shadow. Generally, this is the hour of the elder. Al-Zahrawi sits on his upper terrace, wrapped in a heavy robe of undyed wool that feels soft and comforting against his skin. The stone beneath his chair still holds a faint, ghost-like memory of the day's heat, but the breeze coming off the Guadalquivir River is fresh and sharp. High above, the stars are scattered across the sky like grains of salt on a dark table. To the surgeon, these stars are not just lights. They are a map of the eternal. Looking out over the rooftops of the city, he sees the dim glows of a few remaining oil lamps in the windows of his students. Young men still awake and poring over the pages of the Al-Zahrawi. The atmosphere is one of profound cosmic safety. The world is large, the history of medicine is long, and he is a quiet part of its steady unfolding rhythm. In this space, there is no sound except for the distant, rhythmic tolling of a bell and the soft, repetitive sigh of the wind through the eaves. The room behind him is dark. His tools are polished and put away, and his inkwells are dry. There is a great sense of lightness here, a feeling that the heavy lifting of a lifetime is finally over. The air smells of the river and the faint, cold scent of stone. You feel a sense of absolute protection, as if the night itself is a soft mantle. It is a place where the past and the future meet in a moment of perfect, starlit peace. In those days, the value of a man's life was measured not by what he took from the world, but by what he left behind for the hands of others. Al-Zahrawi, now in the twilight of his years, understood that his true legacy was not the surgeries he had performed, but the clarity he had provided to those who would follow. He spent his final evenings in a state of quiet, rhythmic reflection, looking back over the decades of his labor with a heart that was as calm as the river below. He would sit with a single small candle for company, watching its flame dance in the cool breeze. To him, that flame was a symbol of the knowledge he had tended, a small light that, when passed from one person to another, could eventually illuminate the darkest corners of human suffering. Day after day, he had simplified his life, moving with a slow, deliberate consistency that mirrored the movement of the stars. He no longer felt the need for anything. He found a meditative peace in the simple act of breathing, each inhale a reminder of the life he had fought to protect, and each exhale a release of his own attachment to the world. He would often think of the thousands of pages he had written, the hundreds of tools he had designed, and the countless students he had mentored. He saw these not as personal achievements, but as seeds scattered in a vast, fertile field. He knew that some would take root in Córdoba, some in Baghdad, and some in lands far to the north and west, growing into a forest of healing that would span the globe. As time goes by, the sense of connection he felt to the future became almost tangible. He would imagine a surgeon in a century he would never see, opening a copy of the Al-Zahrawi by the light of a different lamp. He imagined that surgeon's hand becoming steady as they looked at his drawings of the Silver Sutures or the non-sinking trepan. This mental image brought him a profound, quiet joy. He believed that knowledge was a living thread, a silver suture that bound the generations together in a common purpose of mercy. He used the same simple, repetitive phrases in his mind to ground his spirit. I have served the heart. I have guided the hand. I have honored the life. In those days, the silence of the night was a library in itself. Al-Zahrawi would listen to the world around him, finding a deep resonance in the smallest sounds. He heard the rhythmic scratching of a mouse behind the wainscoting, the soft hoot of an owl in the garden, and the distant, muffled footsteps of a night watchman. These sounds were like the notes of a familiar song, a song that told him the world was in good hands and that his time of watching over it was coming to a natural. He felt a sense of immense safety in this realization. He was like a traveler who had reached the crest of a high hill and could finally see the lights of home twinkling in the valley below. Meanwhile, he continued to find beauty in the tools of his trade, even if he no longer used them. He would occasionally open his wooden chests and run his fingers over the smooth handles of his scalpels and the cool silver curves of his probes. They felt like old friends, their weight familiar and comforting. He saw them now as symbols of the bridge he had built between the unknown and the understood. He believed that by naming the tools and describing the techniques, he had removed the shadow of fear from the art of surgery. He had turned a terrifying ordeal into a disciplined craft, a transformation that he considered his greatest gift to humanity. He often thought about the nature of time and how it smoothed the rough edges of memory. He remembered the faces of the people he had healed, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. He remembered the quiet intensity of the operating room and the cool, damp scent of the medical garden. All these memories had become a part of his inner landscape, a sanctuary where he could always find peace. He wrote in his heart that a life well lived is like a well-tended garden. It continues to provide shade and fruit long after the gardener has laid down his tools. This thought gave him a sense of immortality that was rooted in humility rather than pride. In the quiet of the late night, Al-Zahrawi would look up at the constellation of Orion, seeing the hunter's belt as a row of steady lights guiding him forward. He felt a profound sense of unity with the universe. He saw the same patterns in the stars that he saw in the sutures of the skull and the veins of a leaf. Everything was connected. Everything was connected. Everything was part of a larger, more beautiful whole. He understood that his own life was just a single heartbeat in the life of the world, and this realization brought him a deep. He was no longer a man fighting against death. He was a man who had made peace with the cycle of life. As the moon began its descent, Al-Zahrawi would close his eyes and simply exist in the stillness. He felt grounded, satisfied, and ready for the final transition. He had done what he came to do. He had mended the broken. He had recorded the truth, and he had lived with compassion. He felt a sense of immense gratitude for the steady hands and the clear mind that had served him for so long. The legacy he was leaving behind was not one of stone or gold, but one of light and healing. A legacy that would stay under the starlight, waiting for the hands of the future to pick it up and carry it forward. The night reaches its absolute zenith, a moment where the silence of Córdoba feels almost solid, yet infinitely soft. Within this peak of stillness, Al-Zahrawi experiences a profound internal climax, the merging of his identity with the knowledge he has labored to preserve. He is no longer just a man sitting on a terrace. He is the vessel for 1,000 years of wisdom, and he is now ready to let that vessel pour its contents into the sea of the future. He looks at his hands, thin and etched with the lines of age, and realizes they have become symbols of the human capacity to mend. The rhythmic pulsing of his heart feels synchronized with the slow rotation of the stars above. In those days, the final achievement of a master was the attainment of a quiet mind, a state where there is no longer a struggle between what is known and what is unknown. Al-Zahrawi feels a surge of quiet, luminous energy. He begins to visualize the journey of his books, the Al-Tasrif, as they leave his study. He sees them being copied by the steady hands of scribes, the ink flowing into the shapes of the scalpels, and the sutures he designed. He imagines these pages crossing mountains and seas, carried by travelers and scholars. He sees his diagrams being studied in the great universities that are yet to be built, his words translated into languages he will never hear. This is not a vision of ego, but a vision of service. He feels a deep, resonant satisfaction in knowing that his work will be a lantern for others in their own dark hours of uncertainty. The atmosphere on the terrace becomes weightless. The boundary between the surgeon and the night sky seems to dissolve. He thinks of the 3 pillars of healing he has written about: knowledge, hand, and heart. He realizes that for his legacy to truly endure, these 3 must remain inseparable. If the hand works without the heart, it is a machine. If the heart works without knowledge, it is helpless. He whispers these 3 words into the cool night air, the sound a soft, repetitive hum that blends with the wind. He is sealing his legacy with a final spiritual suture, binding his life's work to the universal duty of compassion. Meanwhile, the light of the stars seems to grow more intense, as if the universe itself is acknowledging the completion of a great task. Al-Zahrawi reflects on the concept of the perpetual gift, knowledge that continues to heal long after the healer has departed. He feels a sense of immense safety in this continuity. He understands that even as his physical frame weakens, the tools he perfected and the techniques he refined will remain sharp and effective. The silver wire will still hold, the cactus will still dissolve, and the non-sinking trepan will still protect the brain. He is a part of an eternal architecture of care, a structure that is built of both steel and spirit. Gradually, he moves toward a state of total surrender. He has answered every question he could, drawn every line he was meant to draw, and taught every lesson he was assigned. He feels a profound connection to the patience of the future people who will never know his name but will be saved by his designs. This silent gratitude is the highest reward he could imagine. He leans his head back against the stone wall, his breathing becoming so slow and shallow that it is almost imperceptible. He is matching his rhythm to the slow, cold breath of the stone and the ancient, steady fire of the stars. In the quiet of this climax, there is a sense of cosmic homecoming. Al-Zahrawi feels that his work has been a way of translating the laws of the universe into the language of the human body. He sees the same geometry in the heavens that he found in the architecture of the skull. This realization brings a final, overwhelming sense of peace. He has bridged the gap between the divine design and the human necessity. He has lived his life as a prayer of action, and now the prayer is reaching its final amen. He feels a deep, warm glow in his chest, a light that does not require oil or a wick, but is fed by the simple truth of a life well lived. As the first hint of the pre-dawn gray begins to touch the eastern horizon, Al-Zahrawi closes his eyes for the last time that night. He is not falling asleep. He is entering the legacy he has created. He is becoming the ink on the page, the curve of the needle, and the cool scent of the medical garden. He is drifting into the history of healing, a quiet, steady presence that will remain as long as there is a wound to be closed or a pain to be eased. The climax of his life is not a sudden end, but a beautiful, rhythmic fading into the light of 1,000 years. He is at rest, he is complete, and his starlight will never truly fade. The silver stars have begun to pale as the first breath of dawn touches the sky over Córdoba. The deep indigo curtain of the night is lifting, replaced by a soft, translucent violet. On the terrace, the elder surgeon remains still, his hands resting quietly in the folds of his wool robe. The lamp beside him has long since sputtered out, but he no longer needs its light. The work is done, the legacy is sealed. You can imagine the profound silence that blankets this moment. It is a silence filled with the weight of 1,000 years of wisdom and the lightness of a soul at peace. The rhythmic sighing of the river below and the cool, damp scent of the morning air create a cocoon of absolute serenity. The world of 10th century Andalusia is slowly receding, drifting into the golden haze of history. The city of Córdoba, with its arches and gardens, its libraries and its clinics, is becoming a beautiful, distant memory. There is no more need to hold on to the story. The journey through the corridors of the Al-Tasrif, the walk through the fragrant garden, and the quiet hours in the starlit study have all led to this single point of rest. You can feel this same sense of completion within yourself. The muscles of your body are heavy and warm, sinking into the mattress as if it were the softest sand. The thoughts of needles, parchment, and stars are blurring into a single rhythmic hum, a lullaby of history. As the image of Al-Zahrawi fades into the morning mist, you are left in the perfect protected stillness of your own room. The echoes of the past have provided a bridge to a deep, restorative sleep. You are safe. You are cared for by the knowledge of those who came before. The light is soft, the world is quiet, and you are ready to drift away, down deeper and deeper into the timeless peace of a dreamless rest. Good night.